Now, most people think that freedom is just doing what you want when you want. But what if I told you it's that exact same mindset that is keeping you trapped and keeping you from reaching your ultimate level of freedom? When you think about it, freedom is not about escaping discipline, but it's about mastering. It's about becoming it. The most successful people aren't people that have no rules, but they're people that set their own rules and then they follow them relentlessly. So in this video, we're going to talk about how to reach that ultimate level of freedom and become the person that you were designed and created to become. Now, when I hear people talk about freedom, usually they equate freedom to a lack of structure. If I can just get rich, then I'll never have to work again. How do I get rid of some of these responsibilities? Because once I get rid of some of these responsibilities, I have a little bit more freedom. How can I get rid of some of these kids? I mean, I don't want to get rid of all of them. I just want to get rid of the ones that get on my nerves. It's like, you only have one kid. But they think if I can just build a life where I can do what I want when I want, then I'll be free. But in reality, that's not freedom. That's chaos. Because you're subjecting yourself to live at the mercy of your emotions. You're subjecting yourself to live at the mercy of your impulses. And I've not met one person that is highly successful that is emotional and impulsive. Not one. So when you think about it, most successful people that have the most money, that are in the best shape, people that have the strongest relationships, they aren't people that just wake up and wing it. But they're people that wake up with intention, with focus, with structure, with discipline. They're people that create systems in their lives that help them to build positive habits so they can become a prepared person, a valuable person. And because of that, they're free. But on the other hand, people that reject discipline, that reject structure, people that do what feels good in the moment, what happens to them? They choose pleasure over purpose. They choose poverty over prosperity. They chase the high of their negative emotions. They allow their life to be controlled by their impulses, by their bad habits. And in their mind, they might think they're free, but in reality, they're trapped. Because those who reject discipline will become slaves to their impulses. Like I said, I've never met a person that is impulsive and emotional and successful. Right? You think about finance, you think about day trading. Everybody knows if you get into day trading, if you're emotional, if you're impulsive, you're going to lose money. Everybody knows in fitness, if you're emotional and impulsive in your food and your eating and you're not prepared, you're not going to get in shape. If you're emotional and impulsive in your relationships won't thrive. So those who reject discipline become slave to their impulses. And therefore, it cannot be successful. Therefore, it cannot be free. You know, it reminds me of a story of two guys in prison, both cellmates or cellies. And one of them is constantly always imagining and dreaming what life's going to be like once he gets out. Every night he lays his head on the bed, staring up at the ceiling, talking to his other cellmate. Man, just wait. Once I get out of here, I'm going to build me a big business. I'm going to find me a beautiful bride. I'm going to have a bunch of kids. I'm going to build generational wealth. I'm going to teach them right from wrong. I'm going to help them to learn from my mistakes. Right? The food in here is trash. So I'm finally going to be able to eat right. So I'll finally get in shape. I'm going to read every day, write every day. Watch. Just wait. You'll see. And he's just painting this picture of what it's going to be like once he leaves the walls. But the other guy, he's reading every day, working out every day. He's taking care of his mind. He's growing in his faith. He's identifying who he can become. Right? He's reading, writing, everything. Everything to become a better person and a greater person of value. Now, the difference between those two is one believes freedom is outside of himself, outside of his circumstances. But the other one understands that freedom is here, within, right? He understands that freedom is here and freedom is here. One believes that he lacks freedom because of his circumstances. The other one says, regardless of my circumstances, I'm free. Two different mindsets, right? You got to understand, in life, we are not prisoners of our circumstances. We're prisoners of our beliefs. And I had to learn that for myself. When I would go through obstacles, when I would go through challenges, I would blame life, blame people, blame my situation, blame everything but myself. But in reality, the circumstance wasn't a problem. The problem was my perspective, right? It was my beliefs that was the problem. Because now when I look at it, it's like that was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Because it allowed me to build the strength to become the person I need to become and become the person I was destined and designed to become. To help leave an impact, positive impact on the world. That's what those situations did. So the problem was my perspective. See, freedom is a mindset. How do I know? It's because in order to be free from one thing, we must be bound, tied, and enslaved to its opposite. It's the law of polarity, right? Everything has equal opposites. Everything has equal sides. Everything has two sides. So a quarter has heads and tails. A sheet of paper has front, has back. There's up, there's down, there's left, there's right, there's good, there's bad. There's wealth, there's poverty, there's rich, there's poor. We can go on all day. There's happiness, there's sadness. Everything has an equal opposite. So if you want to be free from one thing, you must be bound, tied, and enslaved to its opposite. If you want to be free from being broke, you must be bound, tied, and enslaved to financial disciplines. If you want to be free from being out of shape, you must be bound, tied, and enslaved to eating clean and working out. And notice I said eating clean first, because you can't outwork a bad diet. People try to outwork their diet in the gym, and then they still end up out of shape. If you want to be free from the chaos in your mind, you must be bound, tied, and enslaved to controlling your mind, to controlling the things that you're taking in, to controlling your environments. It's a law of polarity. Everything has an equal opposite. If you're tired of being weak, become bound, tied, and enslaved to building strength. There is no middle. See, the problem that people have is they believe that freedom is about removing chains. But freedom is not about removing chains. It's about choosing the right chains, because we're always going to be tied to something. You're either going to be tied to laziness and unproductivity, or you're going to be tied to discipline. Simple as that. One or the other. You know, something that I think that people don't think about is this idea that they have of freedom in their head. It's like, what are you going to do after you get it? Because the way they talk about freedom is, once I get in shape, I'll never have to work out again. Once I become rich, I'll never have to work again. And that's a fallacy. That's not real. That's not reality. With freedom comes responsibility, accountability, leadership. So you have to ask yourself, are you ready to carry the weight of responsibility and what it means to be free and have freedom? Because there is a certain weight of responsibility that comes with that. There's a certain level of leadership that comes with that. Not just with other people, with yourself. Self-leadership. So you have to ask yourself that question. I have this theory that many people say they want freedom, but in reality, they're not ready for freedom, or they don't want freedom. Because many people become addicted to the prisons and chains that hold them back. Think about it. When you've been raised in the struggle, when all you know is the struggle, when your life has been setback after setback after setback, heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak, when you've been let down by people, by opportunities, by life for that matter, that becomes a comfort zone. That becomes a way of life. That becomes your standard of living. And for many people, they begin to expect those things to happen to them. They expect the setbacks. They expect the heartbreaks. And when you expect that, you begin to respect the chains that hold you back. And as Voltaire said, it's hard to free people from chains they respect. Almost impossible. Right? And it's like a frog. So if you take a frog and put him in boiling water, he'll jump straight out. It's too hot. Why? Because he knows he'll boil to death. He knows he's going to die. But if you take him and put him in lukewarm water, and you slowly just turn up the heat, just slowly but subtly turn up the heat, he'll boil to death. It's the same thing that happens to us in life. All of our setbacks and challenges don't happen all at one time, but they happen over time, right? You have one little setback here, one little setback here, one little setback here, and they compound interest over time. And then eventually you begin to expect those things to happen. And when you expect those things, you behave in that way. See, because you got to understand, everything comes from our beliefs, right? We don't get out of life who we are. I mean, we don't get out of life what we want. We get out of life who we are, right? So if you have a certain level of belief, if you have a certain framing of life, you're going to behave according to that belief and framing. And then your behavior is going to give you a result. And that result is going to reinforce what you already believe. It's a cycle, right? So when you're constantly experiencing setbacks, that's what happened. That's why I believe this theory that people either aren't ready for freedom or they don't want freedom because they have become addicted to the chains that hold them back. So in order to start thriving in freedom, you must first break the mental oppression and your addiction to the struggle. You have to. And you have to ask yourself, are you addicted to the struggle? That's simple. So let's talk about how do we start living in that ultimate level of freedom. Now, Aristotle said, through discipline comes freedom. Freedom is not a decision, okay? Freedom is a decision to becoming disciplined. So if you want to be free, you must be bound to something greater than your impulses. A disciplined person controls their time, so they're able to build wealth. A disciplined person controls their health, so they're free to live without limitations or very little limitations. A disciplined person controls their mind, so they're free to live without worry, doubt, fear, and anxiety. And the beautiful thing is that discipline is not something that you're born with. It's not something that someone just naturally has. But discipline is a skill. It's something that you build. Everybody is capable of becoming disciplined. Everybody is capable of becoming more. It's just some choose it, some don't. That's the beautiful thing about it. Right? So if you want to grow in a certain area or be free from a certain thing, you just have to build discipline in that area. You want to be wealthy? Build financial discipline. You want to get in shape? Build discipline in your eating and your working out. You want to have peace? Build discipline in controlling your mind. Freedom is not a destination. It's a decision to become disciplined. Now, when I say discipline, I'm not talking about inaction, right? I'm talking about identity. Because discipline is way more than an action. It's way more than behavior. It's just not something you do, but it's a part of who you become. Right? See, most people think that discipline is forcing yourself to do things that you really don't feel like doing, and then doing those things on a consistent basis to hopefully one day getting to a point where you're going to enjoy that thing. Number one, that sounds miserable. Number two, that is not discipline. Discipline is the process of becoming who you need to become so you can do the things you need to do consistently. You can't act consistently without first becoming who you need to become. That's why discipline is the process of becoming. Right? It's all about identity transformation. And when I say identity, what I mean is identity is the thoughts you believe to be true or untrue about yourself. Because we have thoughts that are true and we have thoughts that are untrue. That's what identity is. It's that internal narrative that nobody hears. It's that internal narrative that drives your behaviors, that drives your decisions, that ultimately is the thing that's going to determine your life. That's what identity is. And discipline is about identity transformation. It's about becoming more. Because until you become more, you'll never be able to act consistently. So you have to control the thoughts that you think internally about yourself, about your situations, and the beliefs that you have, because beliefs drive behavior. Behavior will produce a result, which will reinforce that belief. Freedom equals discipline. See, freedom is about aligning yourself with something greater than your impulses, of a greater sense of purpose. I'll say that. Right? So you can evolve into the person who can maintain those actions consistently and over a long period of time. That's what discipline is. So discipline is about identity transformation. It's about focusing on who you are becoming. It's just not an action, but it's an identity. It's just not something you do, but it's more so who you are and who you become, because in life, we don't get what we want, but we get who we are. So how do you do that? You start slow, you start small, and you keep it simple. This is in the areas that you want to grow. Just like we talked about earlier. You want to be free from being broke? You must build financial disciplines. How do you do it? Slow, small, simple. You know, it's like I ran my first marathon last year. And before then, I was not a runner at all. All I did was I lifted. I couldn't remember the last time that I did run. And when I ran that marathon, I went to the experts because I didn't know what to do. So I downloaded a training plan. And I noticed with this training plan that it increased my mileage by 5 to 10%. 10% being the max. My weekly mileage by 5 to 10% each week. And what I learned is if I was to go out and start running, to go from 0 to 30 miles a week, that's a guaranteed injury. And probably not a small injury, probably a serious one. In life, it's the same thing with discipline, right? So just like I had to do with the marathon, I had to start slow, had to start small, I had to keep it simple. You do the same thing because this allows you to build a solid foundation. This allows yourself time to adapt into the person that you're becoming versus just going out here doing the actions, not changing who you are, but you're wanting your situation to change. That's guaranteed self-sabotage, right? See, people want things to change, but they don't want to change. And then wondering why they end up stuck in the same place. So you have to start slow, start small, keep it simple. That's going to allow you to build a solid foundation of habits, of consistency, and allow you to evolve into the person who is capable of maintaining those actions over a long period of time, right? Freedom equals discipline. So you have to understand that freedom is not external. Freedom is not based off of your circumstances, but freedom is here and here. You may not be where you want. You may not have the things that you want to have. But once you understand that freedom is not in your circumstances and that freedom is here and here, freedom is a mindset, you begin to break the chains that hold you back and start living in the freedom that you were destined to live. The greater your identity, the greater your freedom. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you got value out of this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Make sure you share this with somebody you feel might be able to get value out of this video. And I'll catch y'all in the next one.